A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. Myself, Vaibhav. In today's session of Visual JForex, we will be continuing our work using the indicator H3 trend line, which is a well-known indicator, Hilbert transform trend line. This is the third and the final part, and in today's setup, we will be completing the algorithmic setup for execution of the sell trade. For buy side, we had completed the defining of conditions. This is the setup so far, the progress so far. We have defined the instrument subscription. This time around, we are working with the USD JPY as the instrument of choice. After that, the position amount was defined at 0. These ST trend line blocks have been added. First two are of hourly candle period and latter three are of 5 minutes each. To calculate the price band, I have also defined this 10 pips variable to look at the price action immediately prior to the execution of the trade. We will be looking for these 5-minute candle period historical candles, and to pinpoint the exact entry, these 10-second candles will be used. This is the upper limit for the execution of the buy trade, and here we have this complete setup for execution of the buy trade. Now today it's the turn of getting the sell side of the equation right. For that, we are going to need to define the conditions, and for that I will give you a brief refresher of what the logic is and how we can execute it. For any sell trade to execute, we want the momentum to be bearish. For that, we will be comparing the HT trend line's current output value to the value 6 hours back, and it should be on decline. So current value of the HT trend line should be less than the HT trend line output 6 hours back. That is the first and foremost condition. After that, we also want to make sure that the execution is happening closer to the trend line and not really far off from it. So what we are going to do is we are going to define a price band. The price, last tick price, should be above the HT trend line minus 10 pips. So whatever is the current HT trend line's output, we will deduct 10 pips from it, and the last tick price needs to be above that. So basically, the execution will happen only within this price band. On the higher side, the HT trend line will act as a limiting factor. We will also ensure that the last tick price needs to be lower than the ST trend line. So we will have this 10 pips price band within which the execution will happen. Provided the hourly conditions are in place for any execution, we will turn our attention to the lower time frame charting. And for that, we are going to take the help of a formation where we will need the curve. This HT trend line should have curved recently only. We will need the current HT trend line output to be less than the output half an hour back, but the half an hour back HT trend line output needs to have been greater than the HT trend line output 1 hour back. So we will take 3 HT trend line blocks of 5 minutes each and compare the output value to make sure that only recently the HT trend line has curved in the bearish direction. And also you will need to make sure that the price execution is immediately and also closer to the HT line. So for that, we are going to check how the last 5-minute candles have closed. We will need last 5-minute candle to have closed below the HT line of the 5 minutes, and the penultimate candle should have closed higher than the HT trend line. So that will ensure that immediately prior to the execution there was a correction and now the resumption of the downward momentum. So that's how we are going to define this. Now we get back to the Visual JForex platform. Here we are going to need 9 if blocks. 9 simply because the setup is going to be symmetrical. For buy side we had needed 9 if blocks, so for the sell side same number of if blocks will be needed, which will then be followed by the trade command block market open. open at market. Okay. The current hours straight trend line needs to be less than the trend line output 6 hours back. So first input less than second input. And after this, we will be looking at the last tick price, and it should be within the defined price band. For that, we have to carry out a new calculation to define that variable. So one calculation expression block will need to be added. I will disconnect it and join it here. So whatever is the current straight trend line output, we will add, not add, sorry, deduct 10 pips. 10 pips we have defined here, RPM. This is going to be A1 minus A2. This is going to be the lower limit for execution. Okay. Now I can join it back to the multiple action on the lower side. We want the last tick price to be less than the straight trend line of the current hour. And it needs to be greater than, first input less than, and then greater than the newly defined variable. Okay. So we have this condition which will ensure that the execution of the trade happens within this price band of 10 pips. First input greater than second input. Now let us see what's happening on the lower time frame, 5 minutes. Here we need to ensure that the straight line has only recently curved. So we check the current straight line output, straight line 17. It needs to be less than the output half an hour back, which has been defined with shift value of 6, look back rate of 6. And prior to that, the straight line half an hour back should have been greater than the output of a straight line 1 hour back. So here, first input greater than second input. After that, first input less than second input. Okay. With this, we now have defined the conditions involving the trend line. Now we also have to pay attention to the price action, where we need the last 5-minute candle to have closed lower compared to the trend line. So we need candle 21, candle close. Candle 21, candle close needs to be less than the trend line 17, and the penultimate candle, which is candle 22nd, candle close needs to have been greater than ST trend line 17. Okay, so first input less than second input, and after that first input greater than second input. And after defining this condition, all we need to ensure that whenever price starts to drop below the closing value of last 5-minute candle, the order should be placed. So here I will join it, first input less than second input, and after this we compare the candle 21 candle close with the closing values of 10-second candles. Here we have this candle 23rd and candle 24th, retrieving us the data for last two 10-second candles. Last 10-second candle should have closed lower, so we need candle 23rd, candle close to be less than candle 21, candle close. First input less than second input, and candle 24 candle close needs to have closed higher. So there the condition will be first input greater than second input. Now let me arrange all these if blocks on the lower side, so our setup will look a lot better. And I will join it to multiple action block, and you will see instantly the trade flow going through. Now these are red. Now we have to define the input parameters for this trade command block. This is going to be a sale order. Default instrument remains as it is. Trade amount I will change to 0.1 million. Slippage is going to be 2 pips. Stop loss, we are working with a combination of 10 pips and 20 pips. So with this we have defined the input parameters for the trade command block, And with this, our algorithmic setup is also complete. And as you can see, the formation is symmetric. You can say it is mirror image of the buy side, and that's the way it should be. So that's all from my side for today's session. I hope you have been able to understand the logical as well as the execution part of this algorithm. I would suggest that you build it and then test it on the historical data on JForex platform. There you will see whether it is profitable or not and any changes which you need to make in this structure. Thank you all for joining in. Have a fabulous day ahead. See you next time. Till then, goodbye.